Mark Twain once said, "There's no such thing as a new idea. It's impossible. We simply take old ideas and put them into some sort of mental kaleidoscope." That's as true today as it was 100 years ago. Most ideas that marketers have are not their own, at least not entirely. And there's a fine line between being inspired by others' ideas and straight up copying them. If you've been running a site for more than a year, you've probably come across people who are copying parts or even all of your business. Sometimes it's straight up copyright theft where they steal your images or use your content. Other times though, it's a little bit more subtle. Like for example, when they go after your keywords. Since every site owner has to deal with this at one point or another, today Gael and I are gonna go through what to do with copycats and how to fight back against them.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Authority Hacker podcast. Today we are going to go back on the podcast with Mark and I as we promised. And as we always do when Mark is here, we're going to ask Mark, how is it going, Mark? Because I think people have missed that.
I certainly haven't missed that. It is going good. I've actually been to the first in-person conference in 2 years or something? Down in London last weekend. So no. So far, so good. Although you wouldn't know there was a pandemic in London, judging by the way everyone's going around. But there you go.
Any other news for subscribers or anything else, or can we jump into the podcast?
Did we mention on the podcast that we sold a website last week?
No, we haven't mentioned that. Okay. So go ahead and
shall we tell people? We didn't. Clearly, we do a good job of planning this stuff.
No.
This is going to come out sooner or later because we're doing some marketing material around it. But yeah, a website which we built 4 years ago, something like that. We sold it for a six-figure amount towards the lower end of the spectrum. But I
think the interesting part is it's the first site we built for the first version of the Authority site system. Yeah. We kind of let it sit around for a while, mostly because a lot of people were copying it, to be honest, because it was like the main site. And because we release new versions of the course, there's been 2 new versions of the course since then, right? And every time we do a new version of the course, we do a new site. People had kind of forgotten about it. So like last year, we were like, oh, let's pick that site up and actually fix it and apply all the test stuff and like go back to essentially what we're teaching people so that, we're not full of shit and we actually do with the stuff that we teach and we see a real life result. And we took that site from, as it was an example site and we were not pushing it. I think it was making like $200 a month or something. We just had built it for the example and not really pushing it. And yeah, I think we took it to like around like 5K a month or something in a year and a half or something like that.
Yeah. And then we sold it. Happy days.
So there will be more of a case study coming out. Actually, what's going to happen is, we had that webinar we were promoting to people that we wanted to subscribe to our email list. So if you go on the homepage of Authority Hacker, etc., you see that webinar. I am in the process of refreshing that webinar based on that case study so that it's kind of like a new, interesting, and also it allows me to refresh a lot of tactics we were showing in there, etc. Like everything's still working, but there's still some like tweaks that I want to add to this. Therefore, I am working quite hard right now on re-recording that training, and that is going to be 100% free. We'll not charge you for this, and you'll be able to access all the details of the case study. So that's coming up in a few weeks, I would say. There's still quite a bit of work on the webinar, but there is a piece of content related to that sale that I think you guys are going to be enjoying. But for now, I suggest we jump into the podcast topic because that's what people clicked on the YouTube video for or on the podcast for. And today's episode is all about what the hell do you do when people are copying your shit? And and that's a problem in online marketing. We are definitely a cause of the problem as well. Like when I teach keyword research, I tell people to go and check other websites that are ranking and stuff like that. So, well, in essence, that yields to like people that are copying you if they follow tactics that we would be teaching, etc. But it is an inherent thing in any competitive industry, right? It's like you see, for example, when you go on social media, right? At the beginning, it was just Snapchat having stories, and now every single social media has stories, and they've essentially copied each other because they realized it was a great engagement feature. And now TikTok's doing really well, so like Facebook's trying to do something like TikTok, and YouTube's trying to do like YouTube Shorts, etc. And you can see that it does happen in every industry. It's not just specific to the online marketing industry. Anything competitive, there is a degree of like copying, and that's essentially how innovation works. Like you come up with something and then someone just kind of like makes it 5% better, etc. And over time, things get better for the end user, but for the people who run the companies, they have to deal with people essentially catching up. So let's go ahead, and what we're going to do is we're going to take different things that people might be stealing from you and how we would react to it, or how we would, and give you some stories as well of things when it happened to us, etc. Because I have a few stories when people did that. And I think
the thing I want to say is that if you're just starting out as well, you should expect this to happen at some point. One of these things will inevitably happen. It's quite rare that a business like never has to deal with this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, also, if you're starting out, I would expect you to some extent copy someone else as well. So it's like, you're not always on the receiving end of this. Like, you will be looking at sites in the niche you're trying to rank for. If you're trying to do SEO and you're not looking at a single competitor site to get any inspiration, you're probably doing SEO wrong. So you will also be on the giving end of this, but like that's why it's going to open all sorts of like interesting debates, etc. This podcast. And the first one I want to talk about, which is, it's definitely a debate of whether that's a problem or not, and I'll explain to you why, and I want to know what you think. It's when people copy your site idea, right? So it happened to us several times, right? It's like usually the way it works is you have a site that's starting to do quite well, and like for us, we hang out with quite a few marketers in real life, etc. And I expect quite a few people would like have some people around them that they might be able to talk about that would have the power of like competing basically, and you end up telling them, and then like 6 months later you realize that guy, after you had that discussion, started a website in the exact same niche, monetizing the exact same way you described when you had dinner together or something, and you're like, fuck my life, why did I share this? And you just hate this, and you're like, this is over, I'm fucked, etc. And
it's a
it has
bit
happened.
Dramatic, but yeah, okay.
Slightly, but like this is a podcast, we have to do like a viewer retention, so I have to over dramatize, that's how it works.
Gotcha.
But anyway, the thing is like you were probably not alone in your niche to start with, right? It's like you probably didn't invent a brand new niche or something, or a brand new product, especially if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably like an affiliate or something. So you need a niche where there is products you can affiliate, therefore there are other affiliate sites, etc. So in my opinion, let's say you're competing for the same keyword. That guy literally checked your site, picked some of your keywords, and ranks for them as well. Let's say you rank number 3 and he ranks number 5, right? Something like that. Like something that is still like, you'd be annoyed. Like you'd see it next to your listing on Google, etc. It actually virtually changes absolutely nothing in that situation, because if he wasn't here, like another competitor would be here, and whether you know him in real life or not changes absolutely nothing to to the traffic to your site, etc. And in my opinion, this kind of competition only matters when for a query you are number 1 and 2. Let's say there's someone that you gave some competitive insight to, and you end up on some kind of obscure query. You're like, this keyword, like nobody targets it, but I'm making a lot of money for it. Like that's the kind of comment you probably want to avoid in real life. And then you end up being number 1 and 2, then yes, there's a chance this guy is going to overtake you, and that could really cost you quite a bit of money. Number 1 to number 2 is quite a bit. But in any other situation, number 1 and 3, number 1 and 4, number 2 and 4, etc., in the end, another competitor is above you and is taking that traffic, and you're kind of competing with the guys that are above you anyway. And it's very rare that these guys that you shared that idea with end up stealing direct traffic from your site, even though it's frustrating because you know the guy and you know where his idea came from, and it's like, well, that kind of sucks. But it does happen. And one thing that, like, I'll give you an example of a case where it could have happened to us when we were in the software niche. That's the other case study that is on the Authority Hacker site that I wrote like 2 years something ago. And basically we were in a software niche. And the way I found keywords was not by looking at competitors, but by looking at the support section of these software we were affiliating and finding all the problems of compatibilities that people had with different brands of the software. And I would recommend a brand of the software that didn't have these compatibility issues. So for example, it'd be like, this software doesn't work on Mac. What do I do? And then my article would be like, well, yeah, by default, this software doesn't work on Mac, and there's really nothing you can do. But they have a 30-day money-back guarantee. You can get a refund, and you can buy this one that does work on Mac, for example. And then when I would say this one, it would be my affiliate link. And nobody else did that in that competitive industry, etc. And if I had shared that in real life, that would have been a case where I would actually have lost money, which is why even with real life friends, I tend to not share like our best money making stuff right now in very explicit details, because I want to avoid that. And especially when it's like kind of sneaky and we found some unique angles on things, etc., which can happen. But in every other case, you don't have to worry too much about it. 99% of the time, if like you're competing on the best keyword together, it really doesn't matter unless you guys are number 1 and 2. But what do you think about this conundrum?
So I see there's two types of people. There's people who share openly,
who listen to the Autoreka podcast, and
people who share openly, like, hey, this is my site, this is what I do. It's on their LinkedIn profile or whatever. And then people that, you just will not get what their business out of them. You have no idea what they do. It's like, yeah, I run affiliate sites. And that's how they introduce themselves. And I get it. Why someone would be very protective about it, because it stops people copycatting or piggybacking or whatever you want to call it at this kind of early stage based on your idea. I'll be honest, I don't know how many people go and start a successful business based on, a chat at the bar about hearing someone else like, oh, I run a, paintball site or whatever.
Of course,
I do. I don't know too many people that go and do that, because it's a lot of work, right? You're probably going to do like some actual research and look at like what are the best niches and all that. What you find, or what I've noticed, is the people who are going and like copycatting the niche, they tend to be beginners, and they're maybe like not sure how to do it themselves or if this works, and they find out this person makes, 10 grand a month. So like, oh, I'll just copy their site and I'll also make 10 grand a month, or half of that, or whatever. And
most of the time it doesn't work out. Most of the time it's more like, it's kind of like a rock in your shoe. These people are not very good, but they can kind of like hurt you on like 1 or 2 keywords.
Yeah, it's like, more annoying than actual damaging. I would say as well, the downside of being secret is you can't get ideas from other people. You can't talk about your business with other people. You can't kind of market it as well. If you go on like podcasts,
you can't be the face or something.
Yeah, exactly. And some people don't like doing that anyway. So that's not a big deal. But I personally, as we do it with Authority Hacker, we put ourselves out there and stuff. But on the flip side, with our other sites, we're mostly somewhat more kind of reserved and stuff. And I would say that's probably, a large part due to past experiences with copycatting. And
it's a bit different for us because we're exposed. Like, it's like
we have,
we're exposed through these podcasts, through the content we put on Authority Hacker, etc. Like, people want to know which sites we're running and so on. And it's like, if nobody cared about what I'm doing, I wouldn't mind at all putting my face on stuff. Now it's like when we start a new site, we kind of have to keep it under wraps, at least until it reaches a certain level of authority, so that people don't just go ahead and copy every single thing we do.
Yeah.
Because they think there's some kind of like magic formula in what we do or something.
A couple of years ago, we had Miles Beckler on this podcast, and he had that exact issue when he did a public case study. And when Spencer Hawes was on as well, when we interviewed him, we asked him about this, and he was like, I don't know if I'm going to do another public case study because of this issue. It's different when you have hundreds of thousands of people following you and getting advice on building sites than it is if you're just a random person getting started in this. I would veer towards the let's be open and tell people what I'm doing side of things.
Yeah, I agree. If you're not public in this industry, then I would say it's not really an issue. People don't care as much. Maybe what you can do is you can share what you do, but not necessarily share how well it's doing, which I would tend to prefer. Yeah. And this way it attracts less people and makes them want to copy it. You're like, it's doing okay, and maybe you're killing it or something.
It's interesting. I was just at this this conference, and it's totally not like that at all. But I have been to other conferences in the past where people try and sort of like ego bait you to sort of like reveal how well sites are doing and things like that. So just be prepared for that kind of thing if you go down that route.
So you mean in Chiang Mai, right?
No, a different one actually.
Okay. All right, not in Chiang Mai then. Okay, let's jump on to the next section, which is not necessarily when people copy your whole site idea, but they go ahead and they put your site in Ahrefs and they find your top pages and they start copying that, and you see them releasing page after page that's like your top pages, and you're like, yeah, I know exactly what you're doing here. That's quite annoying, etc. And you end up overlapping in rankings. Usually when you start seeing these people creep up in like your competing domain report in Ahrefs, then you know that they tend to do that. So I like to for example, like a good idea to identify the people who do that is you go in the competing report in Ahrefs, and you screenshot it every month, and you see which domains are like creeping up, and you might catch the people who are doing that, basically. I mean, first of all, it's not going to be an answer people want to hear, but it's part of the game, right? When your business is marketing material, you cannot make it private. Same way as like if someone invents an amazing outreach template for link building, they kind of have to send it to website owners. Otherwise it doesn't work. And that's kind of the problem. It's like, well, when you're doing marketing, it has to be public because the point is to promote stuff. There is some of that. Another thing to note is that I actually have done the test. I took Google Analytics side by side with Ahrefs and even SEMrush. And I was looking at our top 25 pages on 3 different sites. And it was only 60% accurate, which means that quite often some of your best pages are actually buried at like top 50, like quite a lot below the top 10 or top 15. And that allows you to kind of like hide your stuff quite a bit, and they won't see everything, basically. Then there's this concept that I like, which is like usually the site that copy you, they won't necessarily have the exact same niche as you. Like maybe one of you is like a paintball site and one is a outdoor recreation site, for example, and they will start copying you. Let's say if you have the outdoor recreation site, or even if you have the paintball site, you start, like what I do is I let them take over that hub, and I start a hub that doesn't fit the scope of their site. So let's say I have this outdoor recreation site and this paintball site is copying me my paintball hub, for example. Then I'll go and I'll do inflatable swimming pools or something. I'll go and focus my, I know it's a great hub idea, Mark. I see you like it. And I'll go for something they can't copy. And what I let them do is I let them take the burden of what I call the R&D of the hub, which means like if they're copying me, they're probably around the same level of authority as me. And what it means is like the R&D for me is like when you have nobody else to copy, you kind of have to throw content at the wall and see what works and what doesn't. And you will tend to have more content that doesn't hit than when you copy someone else, right? So if that happens, what I do is I let them, I'm like, okay, fine, you want to play that game, I'll go focus my money somewhere else, and maybe reverse engineer someone else that doesn't match what your site does. And I let you catch that content, but then you have to, if you want to keep going, you have to go beyond and try keywords I haven't tried. And then I will go ahead and go back to your site later, and I will find the stuff that has worked on the stuff that you threw at the wall, and I will copy that, and I will make you pay back for what you made me pay, basically. So it's kind of like a chess game, right? You've got to like, and I let them pay with their money back in R&D what they stole from me in R&D, basically. That's kind of the idea. That I see you like the sneaky tactics, but that's definitely like video game type mentality stuff when you're doing PvP games, etc.
I think the other thing with that is just the bigger your site gets, like if you're the biggest site in your niche, you're just going to get people doing this, you're gonna have to try all the time. Like you will not be able to have like secret keywords. Like people will copy every single keyword you have.
But then the next thing that you can do is, you need to think like the person is doing their keyword research, they're throwing your site in Ahrefs and they're looking at the stats, right? And then if the stats are good, they will go for that keyword. And if the stats are bad, they will not go for that keyword, right? So how about you manufacture stats that make the keywords look worse on your pages? For example, if like you've done guest posting in the past, for example, right? Let's say you have a page that's already killing it. It's killing it with very few links. You're just ranking on authority. It was a great keyword. It happens, right? Go ahead and go back to all the sites you've already guest posted to and get some links to that page. Because if they start seeing lots of linking root domains to that page, they'll be like, well, they're ranking, but they have a lot of linking root domains. Therefore, that must be why they're ranking. It's not such an easy keyword, though, so there's less chances they will copy that. On top of you strengthening your rankings and probably keeping them if things are shaking up anyway, especially if that page is valuable to you. So that's one thing that you can do. You can start manufacturing the stats in the sub preview. Think about the stats you can see. It's like linking root domains, it's domain rating, it's stuff like that. So another thing I like to do as well is, for example, we're doing it for a few sites right now. We're pushing DR quite fast. Like we're trying to push DR up quite fast. So like we have a site that jumped up like 10 DR points or something in the last week or something, like by pushing really hard link building. And that's what it allows you to do as well, is it allows you to make the stats worse, because when they open the first of all, people tend to copy low DR sites that are ranking well. So if you're able to push your DR up with stuff like Shotgun Skyscraper, etc., there's less chances they will copy you, and also the stats are going to look worse, which means that it's not going to work very well. Another thing I like to do when a lot of people are actively copying me is I like to use my ability to understand the flaws of keyword research tools in terms of search volume, and target keywords that I know will have search volume but show zero search volume on the keyword tool. Because again, it will allow me to like lose their attention. Like they'll be like, oh, these guys are doing shit now. I'm not copying them anymore, and just jump on to the next guy to copy, and then I'll go back to that and do that. And another thing as well is if you're lower DR than the guy that you have noticed is copying your keywords, one thing I've done as well is while doing keyword research, I've held back the absolute gem best keywords until I catch up with them in terms of site metrics at least. And I throw them off with all the zero search volume type keywords, etc. And when I get to the point where I'm like, okay, now we have the same metrics, we caught up with the DR or something, the DR push or something, now I'm going to put the content that I know is the real gems, because I know it's going to be a lot harder for you to go ahead and snag that keyword for me once I'm settled, So like, it is like you've got to be a little bit sneaky. You've got to go in ahead of the guys that are copying you, and you've got to either manufacture stats or like make it dissuasive through your DR, or understand the flows of keyword tools that many people will not understand, basically.
Back in the day, we had a health and nutrition blog, and it's changed now, but the biggest site, or one of the biggest sites in that space at the time, this is sort of like 2014, 15, was draxe.com. And I remember they used to block Ahrefs in their
you can't
robots,
really do that anymore.
Robots.txt.
Like you can block Ahrefs. Yeah, you can block Ahrefs, but the only thing that it blocks is the links coming from your site to other sites. Like they scrape Google to get your rankings. So I don't know how they got off Ahrefs, but I actually was checking before when we were preparing this podcast, like how the Ahrefs bot works and how to block it. And you cannot do that, actually. Like they say, they will only not show the links from your site to other sites. If you block, basically they will not show the information that is on your site, but they have no problem showing data about your domain that is not on your site, like your rankings or your potential traffic. So it's not...
They can find links to your site on other sites, which you can scrape, or on the SERP. So yeah, you can't really get around that.
Actually, yeah, I'll probably ping Tim and I'll ask him if it's possible to do that, and maybe I'll update next podcast, because this is a question I have. Like, can you opt off Ahrefs?
But even if you can, you just use one of the less well-known keyword tools, and they tend not to be blocked. So
the main use of SERPstat is to literally get the data that is blocked to Ahrefs, because everyone's blocking Ahrefs SEMrush, but nobody blocks SERPstat. So it's like, if you're a sneaky person in a sneaky niche, then a subscription to SERPstat is not a bad investment. That's all I want to say here. Including links and PBNs is a really good place to find them as well.
All right, let's talk about content itself when that gets copied, because when we first got started 11 plus years ago, that actually used to be quite a big problem, where a big site would copy the content of a small site and sometimes even outrank them. I think it was the Panda update. This is like, again, going back probably 9 years, when Google changed it so that the first site...
I don't think it was Panda.
I'm pretty sure it was.
I'm not sure. Maybe, I think it was Caffeine, but I'm not 100% sure.
I thought it was all about duplicate content, Panda, and Penguin was the link.
So if someone is old enough in listening to this podcast, then you can let us know. But it's one of these updates around that time, yes.
One of these animals, anyway, was... The change was the first site to publish an article was credited as the original source, and anything else, in theory, would be discounted. Now, there are a few tricks and peculiarities around that. It wasn't actually the first site to publish it. It was the first site to have it indexed. And if your site didn't get indexed very often and another one did, then there was potentially some issues there. But more or less, it solved the issue, and you didn't have to worry about people just copying your content and outranking you from about 2011 onwards. one interesting case we had even after this is we had a writer that started writing some content for us. And as it was going through the publishing process, so we would have to edit it, upload it, find all the images and stuff. She actually published it on her blog. This was a kind of innocent mistake, but she was publishing it and it was getting indexed on her blog before it was being published on our site. So essentially,
after we paid her for the content.
Yeah. So she didn't understand SEO. She didn't know what she was doing here. Didn't know that was a big deal. But yeah, that's one thing that happened to us. So you have to be careful for little things like that. And if you're have like a demo version of a site, or your what do you call it, like a staging area which it gets indexed, there are potential
you need to be careful of the
issues
sites, yes.
with things like that. So you just be very careful to make sure that the first time Google sees a piece of content published on a site is on your site.
On that topic, I don't think people know, but if you use Grammarly Premium, it actually has a duplicate content checker. It shows you all the sites with the sources where content may come from, etc. So Grammarly is not only a great tool for like non-native speakers like me to like actually fix stuff like that. That allows me to write the newsletter, for example. Like it helps me a lot. But it also helps you for that kind of stuff to find this kind of like duplicate content if a writer has been submitting content that was published somewhere else and stuff like that. So I highly recommend Grammarly Premium because altogether it's a pretty good tool. It's not too expensive as well. So yeah.
And another issue which happens a lot is scraping sites. I don't know why half of these sites do it, but you will have, if you go into your Ahrefs for your own site, you will have hundreds of sites which scrape the content on your site and publish it on their own site as a blog post. Not sure exactly what they're doing half the time. I really can't understand the business model here. It's mostly automated, but it happens. I would say just in general, like, don't worry about it. It's generally not going to affect you. Some people freak out when they see sites doing this for the first time. It's not that big of a deal.
It does nothing. Yeah.
So that's kind of like the direct wholesale copying, which generally you don't have to worry about these days because it's not going to affect your SEO. There are some more indirect ways of copying though. So for example, if you have an article, 10 things about paintball, 10 beginner paintball tips, you can have someone come in and not only copy your keyword, but go through your article and all their tips are the same as yours. All their examples are the same as yours. Their conclusion is the same as yours. Like they've essentially rewritten the article, so it's unique in the eyes of Google. It's not the same, and they're not going to get penalized. But they've still kind of like stolen from you, intellectually speaking.
Yeah.
In a manner.
Neil Patel did a few times to us actually.
I mean,
I've
heard that like a lot of stuff that he's done.
I actually have a story about this. People love these kind of stories. I know it. And I'll tell you which blog post it was on Authority Hacker. It was the one on Freshness about updating the publish date. That I did. It was like that plugin I had found at the time, which I don't recommend anymore. But at the time it was kind of good. And it allowed you to update the schema data on your post. And it would just like, I showed like the fucking crazy bumps in rankings from just changing the publish date, right? So I wrote that story. It was pretty unique. Like nobody was talking about this, etc. Literally 2 weeks later, I'll just say his name, like bloggingx.com. This guy literally just writes the exact same thing with the exact same plugin, the exact same examples, the exact same everything. And actually ends up outranking us and then comes to me, I think 2 months later, like, oh, I'm a huge fan. I would love to like work together, etc. I'm like, fuck off, you just copied our content, etc. So yes, it does happen to us. It will happen to you too, and people will do that. But I think one thing that is interesting with that is not necessarily this kind of tutorial I was giving you, but rather list posts. Because I think something very specific is happening with list posts with search intent, which is more and more in list posts, it tends to be the post with the most links that the most items rather in the list that tends to rank higher. It just ends up becoming a wall of
list arms race.
items. Yeah, exactly. It's like you start like, top 10 things, and then it's like top 12 things, and then top 15, and you end up like, we have some keywords, so it's like top 120 and stuff. Like, it's just like insane, right? And it's like lists are becoming like that. And so they're a very, very good opportunity for people to go ahead and go and steal your points, so like you just steal like the sub points, because eventually you cannot. And so again, it's one of these things where I now let people go ahead, but barely. It's like I monitor the page, and every time they change the page and they update the list items, let's say they copied us, like we were at 12 and they were at 10, and they did like 14, let's say, like to try to update. I let them get to 14, and then the day they update the article, I let them do the work, and I go and take their points after they stolen from me. And I just let them do all the research. And then my writer like has twice less work and can update, within 48 hours. And really, the effect on rankings is minimal at that point, whether if you're fast enough,
I know one guy, I'm not going to say which niche because it'll probably reveal who it is, but had that arms race going on. And he wrote like, 22 things about whatever. And he actually then also had his writer write like 35 or 44 things about it. So it's written, it's in draft format, ready to go. So as soon as the competitor did like 30 things about it, he published it. And it was like, so it kind of dissuaded people there. But you could argue that just makes the whole thing worse,
in the end, like, list posts eventually, what happens is then you hit a too high word count to the point it starts to be detrimental to your page on time and stuff like that, which eventually you will lose rankings. So then the list items have to get shorter and shorter and shorter, and then you end up with literally just a giant bullet list, and that's the post, and that's the nonsense that is Google search intent, not relying on link metrics, but rather relying on this kind of stuff. And also because numbers in title tags is what makes people click. So when there's like 120 versus 100 or something, people will click the highest number because they think it's better. But that's essentially the arms race nonsense that Google search intent has introduced to some types of query. And I am amazed that they haven't identified that. And I would not be surprised that if the next few years there's some reversal of search intent to some extent, actually.
Sometimes with this as well, it can be, we've had like friends of ours do this to us and stuff, and it's not necessarily like done out of evil, like the person at the top saying, oh, let's get Mark and Gael. But, their editors looked at it and, that's the way you beat people. You look at their keywords and you do better than them. So like, I would just say, like, don't take this stuff too personally when it happens. It's part of the game of SEO. It's a competition at the end of the day, and you have to play it in order to succeed. I do have one really interesting case where someone went a little bit far with this. So they had basically done this with their writer. They'd said, rewrite Mark and Gail's content, try and make it a bit better. And they did that. I wouldn't say made it any better. It was at best like 80% as good. But they'd actually used the same images which we had used as well. And I think they tried to argue that, they're just generic images from the site. But
was it hot linked?
It was, no, it wasn't hot linked. Sometimes it was using like cropped and changed, and the arrows were different and stuff. But they had used the source images. It was like a Elementor review or something like that. And it had my login in it. So like we were logged into WordPress. And like my photo was in the profile at the top right. And I think it was even like our website and the picture as well. So they hadn't really thought this through particularly well. Now, there's nothing you can do if someone's rewriting your content and, doing this legally speaking, there's nothing you can do. But if they are using your images, that's different. So I want to talk about that now. Because
I have a trick for images too after, but go ahead.
Images, any image you create, you hold the copyright for. And people cannot, or they're not allowed to use that without your permission. It happens all the time, but the law says they're not supposed to do that. You can identify this mainly through reverse image search. So if you take any image, go to Google Images and you just drag and drop the image or upload it there, Google will find where that image is on the web. And there are tools like TinEye, and there are a few other ones which will do this automatically. So it kind of monitors it whether someone's doing this. You can upload all your images there. We had Stacey McNaught on this podcast some time ago, and she talked about doing this as a way of link building. So whenever this happens, whenever someone's using your image, you can reach out to them and sort of say, hey, don't do this. You're not supposed to, but it's okay if you link to me. It's in a nicer way, but essentially that's the message you're sort of communicating. And she builds quite a lot of links that way. We've tried it a little bit, haven't had too much success with it, but I think we haven't properly optimized it yet. If you actually don't want them using your image though, for whatever reason, then you have the right to get it taken down. And there are a few different ways you can do this. If it's a reputable site, if you just ask them to take it down, they probably will, because they're law-abiding citizens and they don't want to get sued.
For sure, that's how it works.
Interesting case though. There's a company called Getty Images, and if you've been running websites for any amount of time, you probably had an email from them at some point threatening to sue you. And there are a few other companies do this as well. They own the copyright to millions of images, and they're constantly searching for people who use them. It can be something innocent, like someone's downloaded it from a stock site and then uploaded it to a free stock site, and then you've downloaded it from the free stock site thinking it's free, but it's not. And then you get an email saying, hey, you're damaging our reputation and brand, pay us $10,000. If you ever are on the receiving end of something like that, don't respond, because it's one of those things where the people who respond get milked. There's so many people doing it that the people who don't respond, they tend not to follow up. And I even heard of one case with this where
it's like shotgun lawsuits,
It is. That's exactly what it is. Shotgun shakedowns with copyright. And I even heard of one case where someone paid not the whole 10K, but like a couple grand, and then they hit them immediately with like 10 other demands for payment as well, for other images which they'd used, and they hadn't had their lawyer to make sure that they wouldn't get sued, and that was at the end of it. That was the final settlement. They'd just done it all themselves. So just be very careful with images and this kind of stuff. And the final thing you can do is called a DMCA, Digital Millennium Copyright Act. It's a law which was passed to basically protect against Napster, I believe, which was one of the first music sharing sites. But it also works
for all the young people here.
Yeah, this is how I got my first MP3s in, I don't know, 1995 or whatever.
Maybe they'll go after you now.
But the DMCA takedown notice is a very quick way that a copyright holder can notify a hosting company, or most likely it's going to be Google. And if they send it to Google, then they will remove your article, your link from a SERP. Now, it's not going to take down your whole website, but if your article has copyright images on it, someone sends you DMCA, Google remove that URL from their index. So yeah, just be very careful of that as well.
Okay, I have another trick if you want to like annoy people who hotlink your images. If that's the case, I mean, first of all, there is a tool to prevent hotlinking in Cloudflare. So if you're using Cloudflare, feel free to turn that on, because this uses your bandwidth as well. If you're using like a high quality host or something, you're gonna pay for people's bandwidth if they steal your images, which is quite annoying. But another thing you can do is like we actually have a plugin that we use to manage our images on Authority Hacker and some other sites called WP Media Folder. And that also gives you the opportunity to replace an image. So like update an image, but keep the same URL, right? So do you see where I'm going here? You can literally make an image that is just like a giant ad for your site or something like that, and replace that, like any image that gets stolen too much, you can replace that image with like a big URL to your site, or even a URL to an affiliate offer. Like you can make an ad, whatever you want, right? And if you replace that image, then everyone who's hotlinking to that image is now going to start showing that little ad that you put together. And all you have to do is go back to your original post, re-upload the image with a different URL and change it in your post, and you get a bunch of free advertising. So if people are stealing your images, you can either block them with Cloudflare, or you can use their impressions to advertise whatever you want.
I'm really learning a lot about you, Gael. I'm so glad I never got on the wrong side of you. Like I feel like you'd be like very like formidable foe in like some kind of vendetta.
Well, it's all the online gaming and like, trying to find every little strategy to like outdo your opponents in PvP and stuff like that. It's the same mentality that you can apply to online marketing. So yeah, it's like, obviously when I think about, more, let's say, ethical tactics, obviously the less ethical ones also comes through my head. So it's like, I'm sure these ones are like not very bad. And plus, in the first place, these people are stealing your stuff. So it's like, I don't feel bad about that.
Yeah, I would say with all of this stuff with copycats, like it's very easy to get drawn into like an emotional, like, oh, they've stolen, I should hurt them. Most of the time, you're better off like ignoring them and just focusing on like doing well with your own business rather than trying to like hurt someone else's. I agree. Most of the time, there are exceptions, of course, but
I'm sharing all this stuff, but I it's the stuff I've done once or something, like more for like, does this work or something, like just to like, the hot linking, I was like, okay, can I really just control the content on their site now that they're hot linking to my image? And it's like, it was just like interesting to try, but like most of the time it's not worth it. And I just triggered that option in Cloudflare and that's it, so like, it's just fun.
I want to talk briefly about company names and branding and that kind of stuff, because when you're starting your site, this is something which a lot of people overlook. They don't look to see if a company exists already with a name or a similar name, and if that trademark has been registered. It's something that's very important when you're trying to come up with a domain name. There are multiple, like millions of cases where companies have had to change their name after they got to even a reasonable size.
It happened to Perrin, like when Perrin started HerePub, actually, his dog's called Chewy, and like he called it Chewy Says, which obviously Chewy.com wasn't very happy with. Yeah. And he got hit by, a trademark infringement, and he had to hand over the domain to them. And I think he redirected. I'm not sure. Like he either redirected or handed over the domain, but he had to cease and desist under that trademark, basically. And so like, it happens to people even at a small scale, and it happened to someone that you might have followed if you've been following us for a long time. And that's where hip hop came from initially.
The rules with this stuff are basically whoever was doing it first has the first use trademark. Now, in most countries, most Western countries like United States, United Kingdom, the company using the name first is the legal owner of the trademark, essentially. And registering the trademark just really cements that fact in law. Other countries like China, you can be using a name for 10 years, and if someone comes along and registers that trademark, they've never used it before, they own the trademark. So you have to be careful in which country you're in and whatnot, but that's generally how trademark law works. There's a very interesting case with Nissan.com, which is not the website for a very large car company, but it's the website for a small computer repair shop somewhere in the US. Really? And they were actually using the name Nissan Computers, I think it was, before Nissan used the name Nissan, because Nissan used to use the brand Datsun or something like that when it first came to the US, I believe. And they still hold the domain name, but it's been like a horrible experience for them because they've had to pay millions of dollars to defend their case in court and fight various legal battles and stuff. So generally, even if you're on the right side of this stuff, if you're going up against a large corporation, it's not worth the time and hassle. Like, just be careful that you're not infringing on anyone's trademark with your name. There is a process to fight against this for cyber squatters and people who are like buying similar domains to yours. We've actually we didn't end up going through with it in the end because we managed to get the domain another way, but someone registered Authority Hackers, the plural.com. And quite a few people actually thought we were called Authority Hackers because like two of us. So Authority Hackers, the Authority Hackers. And they registered that domain name. and they copied our homepage, the design, logo, images, everything. They changed the text just ever so slightly, and then they redirected it to a sales page for another affiliate training course that the guy had made. It was like some Russian dude, which was bizarre. I'm not sure if anyone ended up buying that or whatever, but
I think he was getting traffic though, like some residual
for
traffic,
sure.
you
I
know?
mean, we looked in Ahrefs, and they were actually getting some links. People had mistyped it and things like that. So basically, we had to do some internet detectiving and find out who he was.
I remember that.
Ended up like sending him a bunch of letters like to his address and like where he worked and things
Didn't we
like
send it to his job as well? Didn't we find where he works? And
I mean, it was clear. There's like cyber squatting, just holding a domain, and then there's like, real cyber squatting, like what he was doing, pretending to be us, basically. So he ended up like not renewing it, and we managed to get it. So that's good. But it's a cautionary tale. Once you get to a certain size, you'll start encountering problems like this. So it's a good idea to acquire, the .net and the .uk and like all sorts of different TLDs, the plural authority hacker we've got now. And it's not like when we spend like $200 a year on domain names for authority hacker, which is crazy, but you got to do that to sort of protect your brand. We do have a trademark registered for authority hacker, and that helped us in the next example, which is social media handles. Now,
I remember that one as well.
Social media handles are different from domain names in that companies like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, they don't like people buying and selling them and creating like a digital real estate market in them. I believe it's against their terms of service to buy or sell a username. However, there are some cases when people are using it in bad faith. When we first started Authority Hacker, someone had the Twitter handle. So our Twitter handle was Authority Hacker without the E, like HACKR. Which was a bit shit, but there you go. That's always available. And then that person somehow, maybe they dropped their account, and then someone else picked it up. It was an Indian guy, and he contacted us, first of all, trying to sell it to us for like $5,000 or something.
5,000, yeah.
Yeah. And then shortly after, he changed like the image on it to be us. Basically, the bio was linking to our website, pretending to be us, posting content, like posting stuff from our site. So a lot of people actually followed him, and not a lot, but like people started following him, thought it was us, and he ended up redirecting or like linking to some like affiliate offers and like just dodgy stuff. So Twitter have a process where if someone's trying to impersonate you, you can file a dispute. And in order to file that dispute, you have to have a registered trademark. So we had a registered trademark in the United States, which was handy, and filed a dispute, presented all our evidence that you try to sell it, how he was pretending to be us, all that stuff. And then they awarded the Twitter account to us, which you can go follow now at twitter.com/authorityhacker. You need a lot.
Yeah, and we didn't have to pay 5,000 for it.
Yeah. So you need a lot of documented proof and have everything in place.
How do you get the trademark? Like, how does it work?
So it's very simple. You can do it yourself on the Patent and Trademark Office. Is it PTO? I think it's called in the US.
Can we link to this below something? Like?
We will do, yeah. If you're kind of not like comfortable with that stuff, like I wasn't the first time we did it because we're in the UK and it's a different system and all that. Actually, I believe now if you're outside of the US, you have to use a lawyer to use it. I think they changed the rules on that.
Okay.
So we went with what was I actually had him on the podcast. His name was Randy. So we'll link to that show up here. It's probably not going to be on YouTube. Actually, it was before we did video. But he came on and he sort of did it for us. I think we paid like $400, $300 or something to.
So when is it was doing it?
Like, well, in that case, when you have a domain issue, but like once your business starts getting towards a certain point, like I don't know, mid six figures, like you start encountering like issues like this.
People
and
who want to take advantage.
People trying to take advantage of you. Definitely, when you're starting this brand new website, you don't have to bother forking out $400 to do this. But once you get going, it's something you should seriously consider. It protects your brand. And also when you sell your website, if you have a trademark, it's not a big deal, but a buyer will potentially value your site slightly higher. So you're probably going to get your money back in that case eventually, just from that.
I'd say if you're like going for like the very branded aspect of things, etc. Like if you're like a thin affiliate site, probably not worth it.
Yeah.
But if you're going for something a bit more branded, you have photos of people around and personalities around your site, etc. Then I would maybe consider it.
And this brings me on to my next point, which happened to us relatively soon after we launched Authority Hacker Pro, is that people started to, and this will happen if you have an info product, this will happen to you, I guarantee it. People started downloading, copying, ripping the product, and then first it appeared on some like torrent sites, it was on Reddit for a little bit, and then people started reselling it. And this is new to me. I didn't know this industry existed, but there is an entire industry of sites which copy info products and resell them for like $20, $50, whatever. And it's absolutely infuriating the first time you come across this. I've seen people who run info product sites discover this is happening and give up doing info products because of it, because it hits on like such an emotional nerve for them.
That's a bit annoying.
I would say it's a bit annoying, but at the end of the day, this is a business problem. There's business solutions to this. So try and approach it with a level head. By the way, if you're a buyer of info products, be very careful with these sites, because some of them, especially the ones that charge in crypto, don't actually deliver anything. They just steal your money.
Yeah, some of them are like pure scam sites, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And often you don't get the full course, or it's like a 5-year-old version
very outdated,
or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah. There are a few ways to go after them. You can go after their payment provider, but basically tell them what they're doing. Show evidence that they've stolen your content. You can go after their hosting the same way, but the most common way is go after them in the SERP, so no one can find them, by issuing a DMCA takedown notice. And Google will respond like very quickly, usually within a few hours if you do that. And yeah, people generally won't be able to find them. Now, this process of DMCA takedowns is very effective, but I've seen the reverse of it also happen.
Negative DMCA.
Yeah, negative DMCA. A friend of mine had written a review for a affiliate marketing course, not our one, another one. And it was a pretty bad course, and it wrote a pretty bad review. And then suddenly someone made a brand new site. It was like basic WordPress theme. They copied his article wholesale, pasted it on their site, and then they issued a DMCA against him saying, hey, I wrote this article and this person's copied it. And so Google took down his site or that article based on that. And like the guys who they took down, like his name was on it, his photos were on it, like I'm so-and-so, this is my site. So it was like, yeah, horrendous kind of situation. Impressive. Had to fight back about it, but filed the counterclaim and it was gone. If anyone's getting any bad ideas about like trying to do this to people, it's actually like a really serious crime. I think it's like a federal crime in the US, which is like a more serious one. That's like perjury or something. So yeah, don't do it. But it's a thing you have to kind of think about sometimes.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we're helping people or hurting people right now. Anyway, so how did he fix it?
When they file the claim, you get the option to respond. So he responded, showed evidence that he was in the right, and then it took them a couple of weeks, but they restored it.
Yeah. Can you imagine doing that during like the holiday season or something?
Yeah. And this is
okay. That's my evil side coming up again. Sorry.
This is something which we haven't really encountered it too much, because we're not in any like really like cutthroat competitive niches, but the guys in like gambling and CBD, I'm sure this stuff goes on like all the time.
Can you imagine like mattresses for Black Friday?
Yeah.
Like that must be like the fucking DMCA fiesta to like get number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out,
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I hope Google does something about it, doesn't just like remove results, because like what's the point otherwise? Like it's kind of useless. Yeah, anything to add to this podcast?
Yes. As I said before, copycats and everything that goes around it, it's something which you're going to encounter multiple times as your business grows. The bigger you get, the more it's going to impact you. Don't take it personally, though. Just approach it logically, calmly, and do what's in your best interest, not in the best interest of hurting the people who do this to you.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. It's like don't become that like revenge person that needs to like wants to get it back because they were not nice, so you should not be nice to them. It's like most of the time your time is better spent. Just keep doing what you're doing. If they're copying you, you're probably doing okay. And therefore do more of that. And if you came up with the original ideas, you're still ahead of them. Because they're just looking at what you're gonna do next, and you can fuck with them with the stats I talked about, etc. So there's ways to kind of like lose them, etc. But most of the time, doing nothing is the best course of action, and I think, yeah, I think it should be the main message of this podcast. Is it's going to happen to you, but most of the time it doesn't matter. So on these very wise words, which is quite rare from my side, we're going to leave you. We thank you for coming to join this podcast. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe below so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. And we have some YouTube videos that are pretty cool that are coming too. So join in there. Drop us a comment to let us know what you want us to cover next on the podcast. We're reading all the comments. We don't reply to all of them, but we read them. Thank you for joining in. Have a good week.